My name is Ed Munoz. I'm an associate professor of ethnic studies and sociology here at the University of Utah. And I'm also director for the ethnic studies program. And one of my responsibilities this year was to be co-chair of the Martin Luther King Celebration Committee with Carla Mata. And I want to start off with a quote. "It may be true that the law cannot make a man love me, but it can stop him from lynching me. And I think that's pretty important." There's a quote, a paraphrase quote from Dr. Martin Luther King's speech at Dartmouth College, May 23rd, 1962, over 50 years ago. I recently had a chance to visit the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Site in Atlanta, Georgia, just in October. I'm glad I took the time out to visit the site as it reinvigorated my commitment to issues of social, economic, and political justice. Issues that we as Americans believe to be core ideals. However, as history and contemporary experience has proven in the U.S., these core ideals have not been and are not afforded to everyone equally. Because of this, we continue to find ourselves in an ongoing struggle for civil rights. A struggle that waxes and wanes depending on varied historical and contemporary contexts. To provide a timely example, the New York Times reported yesterday that the Justice Department will significantly expand its definition of racial profiling to prohibit federal agents from considering religion, national origin, gender, and sexual orientation in their investigations. This decision comes after years of civil rights groups' complaints that the definition of racial profiling was too narrow and should include the above-mentioned factors in addition to race. Today's event is the first of many slated for this 30th annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, the longest-running Martin Luther King Jr. event in the state of Utah. Our theme this year is Beneath the Hoodie, a look at racial profiling in America. Now, before I introduce our moderator for today's initial conversation, I'd like to provide some recognition and thanks. We have some dignitaries here, some of our donors and university administrators, but I really want to thank the faculty, staff, and students because without you, this would not be possible. It's the largest crowd I've ever spoken in front of, and so I'm pretty pleased, pretty happy about it. Community, we have a number of community members here as well, and I'd like to give a real special thanks to our MLK committee members. I see a few. Could you all stand up at least? Okay. Thank you for making my work easier this semester. I'd also like to thank our generous supporters for this week's events, the Office for Equity and Diversity, the Ethnic Studies Program, Associated Students of the University of Utah Alumni Association, Goldman Sachs, Zions Bank, Hinckley Institute of Politics, Salt Lake City School District, City Weekly, and the Benyon Center, among others. Also, remember that this is the first of many events slated for the coming week, culminating in a keynote address by Dr. Mark Lamont Hill on Thursday, January 23rd. I think there's flyers, mini flyers right on your chair, and make sure you reserve some tickets there. All of our events are free. You will need tickets for the Mark Lamont Hill event. They're available online. And for more information, please refer to the Office for Equity and Diversity website, our posters around campus, and we also have some postcards flying around as well, I believe. Finally, the MLK committee takes into account the extent to which speakers will generate thoughtful consideration of multiple perspectives, regardless of whether the perspectives represent popular or unpopular positions. As an educational institution, the committee members believe it is imperative to stimulate debate among our students and expose them to current issues that impact the lives of all members of our communities in the state of Utah and across the country. Now then, today's moderator for our initial conversation is Professor Erica George. Professor George is a faculty member with the University of Utah's S.J. Quinney College of Law She's also the co-director for the Center of the Center for Global Justice. Professor George earned her BA with honors from the University of Chicago and a JD from Harvard Law School. She also holds an MA in International Relations from the University of Chicago. She has a number of publications in a variety of scholarly outlets. She also teaches constitutional law, international human rights law, international environmental law, and civil procedure. In 2008, she was awarded the College of Law's Early Career Award. The BBC, The Economist, NBC News, CNN, and the Christian Science Monitor, among other media outlets, have reported on her human rights investigations. Professor George.
Thank you very much. I'd like to echo my colleague, Dr. Munoz's appreciation for all the people who did make today possible. I'm looking forward to an important and interesting conversation with a woman I had a chance to meet just briefly before this, who is truly incredible and remarkable. And I really couldn't think of a more appropriate speaker, a more perfect speaker for what we need to discuss today in looking back at the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and how it lives on. Being a scholar, I have chosen some words from text for you. This is a speech that Dr. King gave on the current crisis in race relations, only he was writing more than 50 years ago. And he spoke about struggle. Since the struggle will continue, the basic question which confronts the oppressed peoples of the world is this: how will the struggle against the forces of injustice be waged? There are two possible answers. One is to resort to the all too prevalent method of physical violence and corroding hatred. The alternative to violence is the method of nonviolent resistance. This is not a method of cowardice or stagnant passivity. It does resist. The nonviolent resistor is just as opposed to the evil against which he is protesting as anyone who uses violence. What Sybrina Fulton offered us last summer after the tragic death of her son and the grieving of many members of the community after the decision in the court decision regarding his death was a different path. She could have stayed home, she could have cried, she may not have spoken out or chosen to pursue this fight. Yet she continues to struggle, and she's converted her struggle into a quest for greater peace and greater understanding. And it is great that we have the opportunity to have her share that with us today. Sybrina Fulton has dedicated her life to transforming a family tragedy into social change. Since the death of her 17-year-old son, Trayvon Martin, during the violent confrontation in 2012, she's becoming an inspiring spokesperson for parents and concerned citizens across the country. The publicity surrounding his death and the ensuing trial catapulted the country into a national debate on the current crisis of race in our country. Despite the intense struggle of losing a child, Fulton has become a role model to many by turning her grief into advocacy. Remaining strong throughout the trial and in the ensuing months, she lends her voice to speak against violence towards children and the need to build better, safer communities for all. Her message not only appeals to both people's hearts as it relates to children, but it is also one of hope and of change, exemplified by her personal experiences and her endeavors. As a mother, she is inspiring audiences to continue to educate their own children about civil rights and to help them feel accepted as part of an ever-changing society. As an honest speaker who truly is authentic and comes from her heart on this matter, she looks forward to sharing her powerful message with us today and many around the world. She's worked with colleges, people in the legal profession, and the community. She's a native of Miami, but her story is truly one that is universal. She graduated from Florida Memorial University, where she earned her bachelor's in English. She's a proud mother. She worked for the Miami-Dade County Housing Development Agency for over 25 years, and today her work is what she will tell you about, and that is working for social justice in the memory of her son. So, I thank you again, and I also would like to invite you to help me co-create a space where we can have a respectful conversation about issues that are emotive, that are challenging. But as an educational institution and as a professor, it is truly my intention that we all leave here educated today. And in order for that to happen, we need the space to be of sharing. So please join me in co-creating that, and join me in welcoming Sybrina Fulton.
Ooh, I never get used to this. First of all, I want to say thank you, Utah. Thank you, Salt Lake City, for having the courage to invite me here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules, because you all could be doing anything besides sitting right here. And I want to say thank you. I want to start off by saying thank you. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about my journey. A lot of the media call it a story. So I might use story so that they can relate to what I'm saying. But this is truly a journey for me. This is not something that I applied for. This is not something that I signed up for. This is not even something that I wanted. To lose my kid. By nature, as a parent, our kids usually bury us. After a full life, after a full journey through it all, our kids are supposed to bury the parent. There should not become a time where we are comfortable with burying our children. And I, for one, will never get used to that concept. It is something that should be uncomfortable to you. What happened many miles away in Sanford should be uncomfortable for you. If you are not uncomfortable with the situation, I suggest you go back to the media, search within, a little bit of common sense, read the reports, the interviews, because you'll know who Trayvon Martin truly was. And I stand and I speak as a representative for Trayvon Martin. As you notice, when I came up here, I didn't come with a folder, a notebook, a pad, because I'm speaking to you from my heart. I want my heart to reach out to your heart. I want you to understand what I'm saying in the words that I speak. I want them to be clear, and I want you to understand what I'm saying. You could not have gotten any average than my family. When I tell you that I'm an average mom with an average household and an average car, an average job, I was the average person. But through powers unforeseen to me, there was a message that was going on through it all. There was a message that said that it's something wrong with the United States. Many of you, like myself, wonder why we are in foreign countries fighting foreign people for a foreign reason. We don't quite understand that concept. It's a lot of fighting that's going on right here in the United States that we have to address. If you are not looking for ways to improve this country, to improve your community, then you are a part of the problem. Because my son Trayvon had recently turned 17 on February 5th, 2012, 3 weeks prior to his death. He was young, and he thought as a young person did. Sure, he was a little immature. He was buying candy. He was buying candy from the store and a drink. So that right there told me the mentality of Trayvon on that particular day. As I also think about what happened, I understand the concept of the hoodie. Sure, it's a little cold outside, a little chilly, a little rain. Of course he had on his hoodie. But is it the hoodie that really made the difference, or the color of his skin? And if by 1 second, just by one mere second, we think that it's the color of his skin, then something is wrong with America. I have no plans of leaving the United States. To me, it's the best country in the world, the only one that I know. Another thing is, I am from Florida. I was born and raised in Florida, and I refuse to leave Florida because Florida has an issue. Instead, I want to change Florida to be a better place. And by me changing Florida means for me to make sure that everybody that turns 18 years old, that they are registered voters, then that's what I have to do. If it means making sure that people are aware of the laws in their city, states, and community, then that's what I have to do. Because when I think about what I used to do as opposed to what I do now, I have a great deal of work to do. I told my attorney after we received the verdict of not guilty that I was disappointed in the justice system, because I truly believe that the justice system would work for us. I believe that the jury would ultimately see that Trayvon was on the telephone 2 minutes prior to his death. Does that sound like a burglar to you? He had in his possession candy and a drink. Does that sound like somebody that's getting ready to burglarize somewhere? Absolutely not. Trayvon was minding his own business, as many of our young teenagers do when they're walking home from the store, or they're walking to school, or they're walking to a park. They are merely minding their own business. They have no intent in their heart to commit any crime. But because someone felt that Trayvon was suspicious, they took it upon themselves to follow him, to pursue him, to chase him, and ultimately shoot and kill him. Not only did we not get enough information from the authorities there in Sanford, which is the police department, I thought that was just awful and disappointing that you're telling me that my minor child was laying on some grass, deceased, and you can't give me the answers as his parent, I thought surely it's something wrong. But that wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing I have endured, and this is going to be hard. The absolutely worst thing that I've seen was the day of his homegoing service when and I'm going to take this slow because it's still painful, when I, at his homegoing service, had to look at my son for a final time, all dressed in white, as if he was an angel going to a prom. That is the absolute worst thing by far that a mother could have endured. To know that I will not get a chance to see my son graduate from high school, walk across the stage with his diploma, select a college, get married, have children, get a good job. He wasn't even allowed the opportunity to vote. So there are a lot of things that I'm going to miss out on when it comes to his life. That's the downside. Now let me tell you a minute about the upside. The upside is that I get an opportunity to save somebody else's child. Although I lost my child in the process, I'm still living. And I have an opportunity to save other children. And that's what I work for. That's what I think about day in and day out, is how I can save, how I can get the message out to help somebody else's child. The conversations that we have, yes, they're uncomfortable, but we need to discuss them. We need to talk about them. Because don't think for 1 second that racial profiling does not happen. Don't think even in your community here in Salt Lake City that it does not happen. Because it does. It's an awful thing, but it does. Racism is still alive. Racial profiling is still alive. Injustice is still alive. And we have to make a difference. We have to change this. We have to think individually, what can I do to help this journey, this story? What is it that you can do to help America, help your community, so that this does not happen to anybody else's child or children? Thank you all for your time. God bless you. Continue to pray for myself. Continue to pray for my family. Continue to be strong and uplifting. Continue to inspire others, as I will continue to inspire others as well. Thank you so much for your time.
So I was right? Amazing. Sybrina shared something with me, I think, that was very special and important before we began this. And she said that her pastor told her that not only do trials and tribulations build character, more significantly, they reveal them. And the content of the character of Sybrina Fulton is awe-inspiring. So you've heard from her, and she has agreed to hear from you, and will be answering questions. So we'll have 2 microphones going around the room. And before those go, there were a few posed earlier that I'll offer now. Okay. Oh. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So this morning at breakfast, you mentioned that different groups are impacted by it. You said right now black males are profiled, but it can later be another group. So unless we address it, can you discuss what it is, what we should be focusing on? What is racial profiling, bullying? What is it that we really need to be looking at?
What I was actually speaking about this morning, that it is racial profiling, that it is being biased over one group over another. And what I also said was my son was African American, and today it was me and my family. Tomorrow it may be you and your family. So we don't want to wait until something happens in order to try to make a difference.
And then in your work with schools, the work that you're doing now, what are the areas we should focus on to prevent racial profiling?
We need to focus more on... we need to focus more on self-esteem, because when people are more concerned with themselves and start character building within themselves, then they stop throwing rocks at other people, and they stop trying to judge other people for who they are and why they are not identical to who they are. A lot of times people want people to be just so much like them. They want them to have the same religion, and they want them to be of the same educational level, and it's same sexual preference, and it's just things that people want, and we all are so different, and people just have to learn that, and they have to just have a respect for themselves. And if you respect yourself, then you will respect the next person.
So back to basics, respect. I think by now the microphone should have reached someone with a question. So if that is you, make yourself known. No? All right. Any questions from the audience? Okay, we have one. We just are getting the mic to that person.
It's not, that speaker. It's not so much a question. Having grown up in a different time where profiling was kind of the in thing, if something happens to you, you don't need to respond with adversity. Turn that around. Don't be upset, because it can happen in a very bad way. And I'm just so thankful to be here in your presence. And just to reiterate that, please, that we can't respond with upsetment because we're in the right. We could be dead right.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Yes. Yeah, sure. Because there's no mic, I'll repeat this one.
Someone said to me after the Trayvon Martin incident, we never think that we would give birth to a martyr. And your son, unfortunately, is a martyr for this country, and I want to thank you for standing up on behalf of your son and continuing to help people recognize that it's a painful thing to hear that your son has been a victim of racial profiling. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you have a message for 17-year-olds? I know when I was 17, if I was walking through the park and looked over my shoulder and saw some dude following me, do you have any thoughts about what I should have done or what Trayvon should have done?
I don't know if it's much that Trayvon should have done, because I still think about what happened, and I still am under the impression that they said one time that he was walking too slow. So I'm thinking if he was walking too fast, then he would have still been suspicious. I think at the end of the day that it's not about Trayvon. It's about the person that felt that he was suspicious. And so we do have a lot of work to do, and we do have to work on mindsets. And that's why it's important that we plant that seed that says, if you're a little uncomfortable about what happened, if you just a little bit unease when you watch the news, just a little bit, you don't have to think whether one person was innocent or guilty, but just by the mere fact of you being uncomfortable with the situation makes me believe that, yes, we do have a lot of work to do, and there is some racial profiling that's going on. A lot of people don't understand it if it's not happening to them, but we just all have to be human beings. And as being human beings, we have to realize that, unfortunately, there are some mean and evil people that are in this world.
This next question may be a bit of a follow-on on that, because you commented about how do you understand racial profiling if it's not something that's happening to you? How do you identify? How do you relate? So this question asks you, what kind of data can be collected to support the argument that racial profiling is a problem?
We can look at the statistics about the deaths and find out who used the stand your ground laws. That's one thing that we definitely could do. Another thing we can do is we can look at the death rates in certain communities and try to analyze why this person was killed and another person is not being held accountable for it. So there is data that they can accumulate and they can research. They have so many different schools and so many different universities and college. Maybe they need to look into that matter to find out, is it really an issue in America? Is it really something that we need to address? And I think people will be surprised that it is. It's definitely an issue.
Yeah, the data actually is out there, but you speak more to how to understand that data, because you're not a data point, you're a mom, and you've experienced this. But bringing more understanding to racial profiling as a problem is a large part of your project and why it is you're here today. So in working with people who are unfamiliar with the subject, how do you introduce it? How do you get people involved?
One of the things that we do, we have training that's called conflict resolution. And a lot of times we understand that bullying is a component of racial profiling. We make sure that people understand the differences that we all have. Everybody is not going to be this cookie cutter human being. We can't all be the same size. We can't all be the same age and look alike and think alike and You know, we can't all be the same people. We'd be robots if that were the case. You know, so we just have to realize and understand people's differences and respect. I'm going to always go back to respect, because we can get along living door to door, next door to each other, working with each other. If you respect me and I in turn respect you, that will go so much further than changing laws, understanding the laws. If this is the case, I think it's just basic respect.
Thank you. We'll take a couple more questions from the audience in the next round.
Hello, KJ. I got a question. The question I have is, do you believe this happened to Trayvon based on the fact that he's considered a human resource?
That he's considered a human resource? What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, when I look at a word and I comprehend the meaning of that word, and someone says human resource, a resource can have value to it or can be considered expendable. So you feel like, as far as the court case and all that, Trayvon was just something that just happened and that's why they dismissed it the way they did?
That's a pretty hard question right there, but it's a good question nevertheless. I think this happened to Trayvon, but it could have been any African American child. I don't believe Trayvon was selected. It just so happened Trayvon was in that community visiting with his dad. It just so happened that Trayvon walked to the store. Those things to me it's a coincidence. But I think he was clearly followed, and I think he was clearly racially profiled, and I think he was clearly shot and killed. Those things that I know, there are a lot of variables in there which I don't quite understand. One of the things being that Trayvon ran away. That tells me his mentality was a kid. His mentality was, let me get out of this area, let me get away from whoever this guy is following me. And then I always go back to the fact that he was on the telephone. And I know when I'm not on the phone, I can be easily distracted by what's going on around me in my environment. And as women, and I don't want to pick on the ladies, but a lot of times when we are on the telephone, we're distracted. And we may be putting ourselves in harm's way by us not being alert and aware of what's going on around us. So some things to me could have been prevented, you know, and I think that it's just unfortunate that it was Trayvon. But I think it's all in the matter of how we deal with tragedy, how we deal with devastating events in our lives. And I know that on the inside of me, if it had not been for the powers to be, if it had not been for God lifting me up, helping me speak, helping me stand, and helping me get through this, I don't know where I would be.
I see a question in the back.
Thank you for sharing with us, and my question is about the work that you've done with young people, and I was wondering if you could share with us the things that you've learned from the young people that you've worked with, the questions they ask, the kinds of issues they face, and more generally about that kind of work.
A lot of young people are afraid, and it's unfortunate. But each year in Miami, and we have one that's coming up next year, because we decided to celebrate Trayvon's life instead of Trayvon's death. His birthday was February 5th, as I said, and on February 8th and 9th, we will celebrate his birthday again. We did it last year, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger each year. So hopefully they'll have a Trayvon Martin walk here in Salt Lake City that I can come to. But what happens at that, thank you. What happens during that time is we have what we call a peace walk. It's in Miami, which is kind of far away, but if you want to get away on the weekend of February 8th and 9th, we will be glad to have you. It's called the Trayvon Martin Foundation Peace Walk. And what that peace walk says is to tell our young people that you have a right to walk in peace. You have a right to walk with anybody, without anyone following you, chasing you, pursuing you, and shooting and killing you. You have that right. So we want our young people to know that it's a short walk, and in conjunction with the walk, we have what we call the peace talk. So after they have a short walk, they have a peace talk. What that peace talk does, it motivates our young people. It lets them know that they are somebody special. It also makes sure that they're aware and that they are linking themselves with somebody, with a positive person in their life. So it's linked to a mentoring program. It also, we have entertainment, we have different speakers and community leaders to come out. And it's just a time for our young people to unite and celebrate themselves.
Real quick, I just would like to ask, what conversations should we be having with our youth? I have a son that's 10. What kind of things should I be preparing him for, to kind of avoid some suggestions?
I can tell you some of the things, I'm no expert, but I can tell you some of the things that I tell my son, because I have 2 boys that I'm still working for. I have a son in heaven, which is Trayvon Martin, and I have a son on earth, which is Sybrina Fulton. I'm still working for both boys. And what I tell Javaris is to make sure that he is being aware of his surroundings. Make sure that you are paying attention, because a lot of times they are on the phone and they doing other things and they not paying attention. So I tell him, make sure that you're paying attention. That's one of the things. I always try to tell him that if he's going somewhere, to take someone with you. Some of the basic things we learned when we were growing up is to make sure you have a buddy with you, that maybe it can deter some of the things or some of the danger that you may encounter. Last but not least, I tell him to stay prayed up, because prayer is what's going to keep him surrounded by good and positive people.
I see another question right here.
Can you address, you talked about conflict resolution. First of all, I want to say sorry also. My prayers are with you and your family. But when you talk about conflict resolution, when it came to the trial, do you feel like the state of Florida represented Trayvon Martin properly?
Get back.
Okay. Two answers. The parent side of me says no, because as a mom, as a parent, we want to make sure that when something happens to our kids, that somebody is held accountable for it. And then on the other side, I believe that they did the best that they could with what they had and what they were up against. So I can't say anything about the state of Florida, because I live in the state of Florida, and I'm certainly going to make changes in the state of Florida. We have a lot of work to do. It took a lot of time for us to get in this situation, and it's going to take a lot of time for us to get out of this situation. So I have 2 answers. I think that the state did what they could in their powers. In their realm, they did what they could. But I think at the end of the day, as a mom, as a parent, just thinking about what happened, I just think more should have been done. It's just something inside of me that says you can't shoot and kill a person and get away with it.
We have a question here.
Actually, I would like to tell my story today and tell you that I'm feeling your pain because I'm going through that with my son. Yes, there are things that happen here in the state of Utah, just like any other state. My son is being accused of a crime that he didn't do. He's facing 5 to 15 years. He's disabled. He's a schizophrenic. And what they said is that he tried to take a police officer gun. He had his hands handcuffed behind his back. It was not possible that he can do it. And I have to go to court tomorrow, but they said that the prosecuting attorney said he would like to talk to the officer to see what he should do, what his decision on my son. They will not give him a plea bargain, but I am fighting the fight. So I just want you to know my prayers are with you. And those things exist here in Utah too.
Let me just say to you, do you have an attorney? Do you have legal advice? Make sure you have a good attorney and make sure that attorney is explaining the process to you. We had good attorneys through Parks and Crump out of Tallahassee, and they explained the process to us for us to understand, because when something like this happens, you're not prepared for it. And I just thank God we had good attorneys that explained everything to us. So just make sure you have the guidance of a good attorney.
Maybe you can catch up after, but there are plenty waiting. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Hi, my name's Keandre, and I'm only 17 years old, and I really agree with what you're saying. Like, I'm from the South, and there's a lot of racism and stuff going on down there, and I want to thank you for coming and talking to us about it, because like, I've really never had anybody to look up to, but you're one of the main people that I look up to, because you fight what's right, what you think is right. You don't care what anybody else says. You do it because you want to do it. It's not because other people tell you to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go to this side of the room for two more questions very quickly.
Okay, so my question is to you. This racial profiling is just such a topic, and it can get heated. And coming from African American woman, and coming from a person that grew up in the inner city, and now I am in Utah, where it's not a lot of diversity, it's not a lot of culture, and I feel like a lot of times people fear what they don't understand. They fear what they don't know. So how do you get this conversation started? How do you get it started? Because I feel like sometimes, they can say, oh, well, the race card is all, it's always the race card. It's always this. And that's not the case unless you've been in my place and you've been in my shoes. And how can you really understand where I'm coming from? So how do you get this conversation started so people can understand, and not just understand, but really, how do we understand each other? How do I understand what you go through as a woman of another race? And how do you understand what I go through? And how can we come together? Like, how do you get that conversation started and action and get organized around it?
Okay, thank you.
One of the things you have to do is you might need to connect with someone, and that person may not necessarily be an African American like yourself. Long as it's somebody that you trust, they believe in you and you believe in them, all you need is positive people. Positive does not come in a color at all, but just make sure they have some of the same beliefs that you have, and then you'll go far. Don't worry about connecting with just your group. The Trayvon Martin Foundation is not just African Americans. It's about children. Whatever color, whatever ethnicity, it does not matter. We are for children. Our focus is children. Okay?
We have time, I think, for just 2 more questions. Is that? I'm looking to someone who's in charge of clock and time. I know there are microphones floating, but it's hard for me to see because there's the glare of the sun and people are moving around. So I see, all right, this one right here.
My question to you is, you mentioned the hoodie and the color of the skin. Both represent a stereotype. Do you feel that we need to to tackle breaking down those stereotypes within our own communities so that we don't deal with profiling?
I don't actually think the hoodie is a stereotype because all races wear hoodies. So I was just in Old Navy over the Christmas break, and they had a sale on hoodies. And you would be surprised how many people wear hoodies. I was on the Anderson Cooper show back when this first happened, and he said himself that he wears a hoodie and jeans to work every day. He said, and nobody thinks that he's suspicious, but he wears a hoodie. The guy who is the owner of Facebook, same thing. He wears a hoodie. So it's not about the hoodie totally. So don't get confused and wrapped up in the fact that Trayvon had on a hoodie. If you wear a hoodie, let me see your hand. Amen. That's
And this will be our last question. But we can continue the conversation. I mean, we've heard from Sybrina Fulton an invitation to join her on her journey. The Trayvon Martin Foundation is doing fantastic work, and I believe we can arrange it so that the Office of Equity and Diversity has a link to their webpage where you can learn more. So let's walk the walk,
and I'll be
talk
back.
the peace. And she'll be back! So, all right. So last question for now.
I just want to say that I share the pain that you have, and having buried a son myself. And I know what it's taken my wife and I to get through that. But my question is, in dealing with young people, how can we help them get through that pain as they are profiled and they are killed, since you will be talking to a lot of young people and trying to help them?
What I tell the young people that I speak to, I tell them that I lead by example. What I mean by that is I don't want to do one thing and then ask you to do something else. I don't want to tell you that you should not be smoking cigarettes and I have a cigarette hanging out of the side of my mouth. I want to lead by example. And that's why I think it's very important that we did not fight violence with violence. We had a lot of people to come up, thank you. We had a lot of people to come up to us and say that because somebody took your son's life, we need to take a life. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second. Trust me, it hurts. Trust me, it hurts. And it made us very sorrowful, very bitter, very angry, very disappointed. But what we did, and I tell young people to do, is take that hurt that sorrow, that disappointment, that pain, and project it into something positive, which is the Trayvon Martin Foundation.
And again, making me right. Could there be a more perfect person to talk about the legacy and lesson of Dr. Martin Luther King? The nonviolent resistance and struggle truly is one that takes courage and, frankly, more strength than picking up a gun and eradicating someone. Sybrina Fulton is going to stay in Florida, and I am convinced she's going to change Florida. And I accept your invitation to help change that with you. So I hope you will join us again. Join me in welcoming Professor Karen Johnson to offer some concluding remarks on the conversation we've had today.
Wow, that was a very powerful message. Thank you, Ms. Sybrina Fulton and Dr. Erica George, and you, the audience, for participating in this dialogue about race. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and school children and community members. I'm Dr. Karen Johnson, Associate Professor of Education and Coordinator of African American Studies. We, the MLK Planning Committee and the Office for Equity and Diversity, appreciate you for attending the first of our Martin Luther King events, which again focuses on historical and contemporary racial problems affecting the identity, culture, and lives of young people. Racial profiling is an important and timely topic. It continues to be a prevailing and atrocious type of oppression in this nation. And it poses a threat to the basic ideologies of the Constitution of this nation. And as the American Civil Liberties Union notes, quote, "This unjustifiable practice remains a stain on American democracy and an affront to the promise of racial justice and equality." When I think of Ms. Fulton's passionate dedication to put an end to violence and policies and practices that disenfranchise young people of color, I am reminded of other activists who came before her. Martin Luther King Jr., Ella Baker, who articulated, quote, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in racial justice cannot rest." Ms. Fulton, I admire your unwavering courage and faith and desire to help push this country to move towards its democratic creed. Thank you for giving us your powerful message. Your message is our clarion call to action, a call for grassroots activists, students, educators, and other stakeholders to engage in a struggle that would put forth laws and policies and practices that would contribute to racial justice. Your message is a call for social change, indeed. I would like to leave you all with this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. He says, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And we must straighten our backs and work for freedom." I want to add, we must straighten our backs and work for racial justice. Thank you. There will be other events starting next week. Well, starting this Saturday, January 18th, there's a day of service from 8:30 to 12 p.m. in the Union Food Court And you can go to, it's a volunteer site and to pre-register, and go to thebinioncenter.org. On Monday, January 20th, there is a march for youth. 2 p.m. is a rally, 2:30 is the march, which starts at East High. And the march is to support our students and the Pastor Davis Scholarship. On Tuesday, January 21st, will be a campus and community panel from 2 p.m. at the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the U. And the title of that panel is Positive Youth Development, Community Resistance to Institutionalized Racial Profiling. On Wednesday, January 22nd, we have Juan, I'm going to butcher this name, Tahano. He's a poet, a spoken word artist, an award-winning teacher, and that will be 12 p.m. in the Union Ballroom. Our final panel discussion would be 5 p.m. in the Social Behavioral Science Lecture Hall auditorium, and it will be a screening of Crimes of Police, a documentary about police brutality in America. And the filmmaker and producer, Antoine El Mohammed, will be there as part of the panel. Then our final event would be Thursday, January 23rd. Our keynote would be Mark Lamont Hill, and it will be 2 p.m. in Kingsbury Hall. It's a free event and open to the public. However, you would need tickets. Thank you.